seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, powers, and virtues, principalities, archangels, and angels. Those are the 9 choirs. Each of the angels and each of the choirs specializes in a virtue or a gift, just like the saints do. So, for instance, I'll have each of us, if you will call out one of the choirs and the gift that they bring. I'll take the first one because I'm in love with the seraphim. I love them so much. And one reason why is that the name seraphim, comes from a Greek word. It means fire. Seraph means fire. And the seraphim are the highest, strongest angels, the one in the highest part of heaven in the throne room next to God. And so their gift is the fire of love. The angels all have the flame of love already. And the seraphim have it like double. They have like a double portion of that blessing of pure divine love. God's love is a power that can do all things. That's very important, and it's significant. It comes right, it's the second choir. They come right underneath the seraphim, and there's a very, very important teaching here. Just the way the angels and their gifts are aligned by God in a certain specific pattern, there is a teaching in that. And this tells us, with the cherubim, this tells us that in order to love God properly, I need to flee sin. And that may sound simple, and I suppose it is simple, but it's not. Because I encounter so many Christians who want to say they love God, they obey God, and then they do what they want, you see? And we hear this from people from all different walks of life, that, oh, I get drunk every weekend, but I love God. Or, I love my wife, but I have a mistress on the side, but I love God. Or, I practice homosexuality, but I love God. Or it could be anything like that. I take illegal drugs because I need a little upper, but wait a minute, no. We love God not with words, but with actions. We love God with our lives. So the cherubim bring that to mind and help me to live it out, that as I love God with a seraphic love, I must flee from sin and begin to live my life the way that Jesus lived his life, and Mary too, when they walked the earth. That's what the cherubim help us to do, to avoid sin and to live in such a way that all my actions are open to pure love. Well, that's my second favorite one, because the thrones bring to mind to you and I humility. Those who've had visions of heaven tell us that God oftentimes sits on a throne of angels. And we believe that's the third choir. The third choir of angels in the highest part of heaven are the thrones. And they actually comprise and compose a living throne. There's nothing dead or lifeless in heaven. Those who have been there tell us that even the flowers sing in heaven. The flowers actually sing beautiful music that would bring tears to our eyes to hear it. Well, in heaven, the throne of God is not a dead throne, it's a living throne. He sits on a throne of angels. And so you can see that virtue of holy humility, it permeates this choir of angels. Like, God, here, take my back. I'm going to lean over. You sit on my back, God. I will be your throne. That's beautiful. And that's humble. And what this brings to mind in our human life is this, that even though I have seraphic love with the seraphim, and even I flee from sin so I can love better with the cherubim, my love will come to nothing if I am prideful. So we need that third choir in order that we can begin to enter the ways, you might say, of St. Francis and Mother Teresa, the ways of holy humility, that I always put God and others before myself. Humility, very important virtue, right at the very top, and that's what the thrones give to the human race. Some translations call that the dominations, the same choir, dominations or dominions, and their particular duty and their virtue was to protect the Christian soul, or any soul, against all the sins of the flesh, to protect us against impurity. This is a very delicate one because this calls to mind chastity. The dominions help me to bring my unruly passions into right order. And we might as well start off, in a very positive way. And that is this. The gift of sexual intimacy is not evil. It's actually designed by God. The devil didn't make it, and nor did the government, by the way. God thought of this. Our bodies are sacred too. Our bodies are holy and they are sacred. And the reason why we're careful with the sexual faculty is not because it's dirty, it's because it's not dirty. That's why we have to be careful with it, because it's holy, holy, holy. It should only be used in the holy manner. What does that mean? It means a lifelong loving commitment to my spouse, who is of the opposite gender. A lifelong fidelity that's open to new life. And so the sexual faculty is something beautiful, something that's actually holy. To misuse it in any way destroys it. It brings destruction into our souls. It can even bring physical sickness like AIDS. It really does. So it's very significant then, as we go from the fourth to the fifth choir of angels, that now we jump from the body, our bodies, to our souls. So there's something very interesting here about this, the logic of the Lord. So the fourth choir is protecting my body, my passions, to keep them chaste and holy, something like Mary and Joseph. Now we want to protect our souls. That's something that can't normally be seen or touched. But that's almost like the soul is like the power source, you might say, of our whole being. The devil can tempt me with my body, but he can also tempt me in my soul by giving me, say, evil thoughts or evil desires, like to be prideful or to put myself above other people or to think maliciously. And so the powers come while the other ones are protecting my body, the dominions. Now the powers come to protect my soul, so that my thoughts and my spiritual desires are something holy. So it's interesting, we can sin on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level we can sin, like having undue ambition. Maybe I'm with like 4 or 5 other Christians, and I want to be always the best in everything above everyone else. Well, that's called a false ambition or a prideful ambition. The powers will work in my soul and come to me with the grace to get down off of that platform and to be humble and charitable and selfless in my dealings. So the powers have a very unique and beautiful gift of helping you and I in the spiritual lives. Another one might be, for instance, I want to skip my prayers today. I just don't want to pray my rosary or skip my interior life. That's also a temptation from the evil one. It's not so much physical as it is spiritual, and the powers will come, especially if I call upon them, to say no to this temptation, you might say, towards slackness or laziness, and to pick up my rosary and my prayer books or to go to the chapel and pray. So those are examples of some of the gifts that the holy powers will give to you and I to keep our spiritual life something, on the road of sanctity, something in a saintly manner. So the next choir would be the virtues. The virtues in particular, they remind you and I, and they're engaged in the spiritual warfare. That very often Christians don't even realize that we are in a battle 24/7. The holy virtues, the sixth choir of angels, they're engaged in a particular way in this spiritual warfare. And any demons that try to attack you and I in our daily walk, like getting us away from our total submission to Jesus and our total love for God, these demons that try to distract us from that and to present something tempting to us, the virtues will come and knock it away. They'll knock that demon away and knock that temptation away. So they're very active. It's a very active choir and very necessary in our time to keep our life, you might say, copacetic, so we can cope with daily life. Because sometimes the demonic temptations can be absolutely overwhelming. The seventh choir, I find particularly poignant, this particular choir. And it's interesting that they're the seventh choir. Why? Because, number 7 is very meaningful in sacred scripture. 7 always denotes a certain divine perfection. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the 7th choir of angels, the principalities, they are sent to teach you and I the holy grace of obedience. And you can see that's another mark of the intense spiritual battle that has occurred in our lifetime, in the last 100 years and right up until now, even with this COVID-19 virus, that has shut down even the celebration of Holy Mass in churches around the world. Well, this choir of principalities, they teach you and I a special grace that is antithetical to Lucifer. Because Lucifer is called the rebellious one. Sometimes he's called the rebel. You see, if we're going to rebel, let's rebel against sin. That's the true rebellion. Rebel against sin. And yes, rebel against Satan himself. And rebel against selfishness. And so the Holy Choir of Principalities, they teach us in a unique and a powerful way right from heaven the quality, and the joy of obedience. That it's not something bad to obey, to be in obedience. It's not bad. That in fact, they remind you and I that there is a God. I'm not God, and I shouldn't pretend to be God. And that's what we sort of forget today. But we are creatures. We are not the creator. We are creatures. And he gave us a nature. We want to follow the laws of human nature, in particular the 10 Commandments. And they're really not meant to restrict us. The commandments of God are meant to free us. Well, this choir of angels, the archangels, they come up, you might say, quietly from behind and support our faith. Because it is true that there have been poor Christians, especially among many of our young people, who have awakened one day and find themselves without faith. And some have completely abandoned the faith that day onwards, almost foolishly. But that could be a real attack of an evil spirit. The evil spirits are faithless, you might say, faithless. They don't want us to believe anything good about God. So this choir of angels is particularly important in our time of the attack of atheism and agnosticism. The angels will very quietly and discreetly, but they will perfectly minister to our faith. So we not only believe, but we know that we know that we know that it's true. They give us a supernatural gift of faith, so we know that that which we believe, that which has been taught to us by God himself, is true and reliable. So they have this particular quality, but also they help us to do good works. Most theologians believe this 9th choir is actually comprised of all of the guardian angels. And they believe this 9th choir is by far the largest of the 9 choirs. And we call them simply the angels, although some theologians will call these the guardian angels, which is probably exactly what they are. And this particular choir, you see how God, he's crossing his T's and dotting his I's? He's making sure that everything is complete and fulfilled. So this last choir, the guardian angels, they have this exquisite duty, and I would say delightful, to protect you and I from even the physical attacks of the evil one. They are quite beautiful, and we actually need this kind of protection. I mean, especially I think of women, because I have 5 sisters, and I'm always concerned about girls and ladies being out like at nighttime. I'm always concerned about that. That's something my dad taught us boys, to always try to protect your sisters and the women in your family. Well, I believe that our good women need to pray to the angels whenever they go anywhere at night and pray this chaplet and at least this choir, so that they get out of the car, wherever you happen to be, there is, you might say, an army of angels around our sisters, protecting them as they go from their car, let's say, to the house or to a store. The angels can literally, physically protect us from any and all danger.